Good morning and welcome to another Fast Tracks webinar. This is a weekly event we do every Friday at 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern, where we cover various topics of the Fast Track software. You can see these events if you go to our website, goftx.com, choose the FTX Lifeline tab at the top of the page, scroll down and look for that webinar button, choose that, and this page will give you a listing of all of our previous webinars as well as our upcoming webinars and give you the option to sign up for the newsletter. You can view all the previous webinars by choosing one of those webinars and then choosing the View Recording button, and you can watch that at any time. Today we're going to be going over the retail software and looking at the ordering methods. Now there's been some changes since the last time that we went over this, so we're going to go over all those changes and review as well. So we're going to go to the Director software, and we're going to choose the Inventory module, and we're going to go to the Reorder tab. This is going to be where we look at all of our methods of ordering as well as all the options for those orders. The first one we're going to look at is going to be the list all items from vendor, and that's very simple. Whenever you choose that and choose your generate order, all that's going to do is give you the option of ordering every single item that's available from that vendor. It'll generate a worksheet and then go through all items that are for the vendor you have selected, and then list all those items in that worksheet at a zero quantity. So at this point, you're going to then go down the line and go down that list and enter in quantities for each of those items that you'd like to order. Now this is going to finish generating here in just a moment. We'll look at that worksheet because that worksheet is going to contain data columns that give you information that is going to be very beneficial and help you in that ordering process. So it just finished up. It's going to be popping up a window here in just a moment. I'm not going to choose to refresh my quantity on hand. This is taking just a moment because it's a rather large order. So we have this worksheet. Now we're going to look at each of these columns. That first column is going to be the order quantity. That's going to be what you would like to order. This next column is going to be the vendor part number. That is going to be the vendor part or the order number that identifies that item at the vendor. The next is going to be the PLU, which is just simply the UPC. Then you have your description, your cost, your retail price. The units field is going to be the number of sellable UPCs, so the number of this UPC that's contained within that vendor part. So whenever you order this vendor part, you're actually going to be receiving, whenever you receive that invoice, in this case, 24 of that UPC. If there's a different description for that vendor part, you'll see that here. You then have your quantity on hand. If there is notice there's a dash in between that. You have one number, dash, and then another number. If there is a purchase unit subunit relationship, such as a carton and pack, this first number is going to be the purchase unit field, and that second number is going to be the subunit field, the parent field, the child field. Then you have your 52 weeks high and low. So of course, here I'm going to have the purchase unit quantity sold and then the subunit quantity sold. For the low, the same thing, purchase unit quantity sold and the subunit quantity sold. This would be the most you sold in an individual week in the past year, and this will be the lowest you sold in a week in the past year. You'll then have the trend, and that trend is going to be based on the following 10 weeks. So if it can be up, down, or it can be nothing. Nothing would be, of course, be the exact same. This week 1 to week 2 to week 3 to week 4, those sales are going to be based on the order week, not the Sunday through Saturday week. So for example, if I ordered today on a Friday, this would be from a Friday to a Thursday week. So I'd see the sales for that purchase unit and then the subunit for that first Friday to Thursday. Then I have the next Friday to Thursday, that previous week. And then it just keeps going back up to 10 weeks and gives you that quick at-a-glance view of your purchase unit and subunit sales for the past 10 weeks. And then, of course, you have that trend you can use. If you have an alternate vendor part, it'll let you know what that alternate vendor part number is, and then that cost for that alternate vendor part number. If this is a great way to look at and see if this item is available for another vendor at a lower cost. You then have the suggested quantity. What this does is whenever you generate an order, this field, the very left field, is the one you can update. The system quantity over here, the suggested quantity, that is going to be what the system thought you should order. So if you're ordering based on a method, not the list of items, but if you're ordering based on like a replenishment method, which we'll go over here momentarily, which is based on sales data, it's going to keep track of what the system originally ordered. The store quantity, this would be if you're in a working order, which we'll go over momentarily as well. This will show what the store changed that value to be. So these could be the same, that system generated quantity and the store quantity, or they could be different. The store could have changed that value from the system's original suggestion and then updated to what they think. You then have your average sales per week, if that item is a new item. And then over here, we're going to have the system quantity, the department that item is in, and then the out of stock days. And this is a new field here. If an item was out of stock in a suggested order range, or a order range that you wanted the system to look for your sales data, it's going to tell you how many days that item was out of stock in that order period. So if it went out of stock 2 days into the order period, then it's going to basically do that math and tell you from that point it went out of stock to the time you did your order, how many days was that item out of stock. You then can also press this hyperlink, which is also new, calculate out of stock. That's where that field actually gets populated. That's how that number gets put into place. So let's go close this. We're going to look at the different methods, vendors, and filters. So of course, we just chose the default list all items from vendor. There's going to be another very basic called the reorder using blank order form. And this does exactly that. Whenever you choose that method and you choose generate order, it's simply going to give you a blank order form. And at this point, you will be using the lower portion of the screen to enter in all those items. So for example, if I wanted to look up at a UPC and enter that UPC on the order form, and I don't know that UPC, I can choose this find hyperlink. I can then search by a vendor part, UPC number, description. So I'm going to search for an item here. And let's say I want to add a Marlboro carton to this order. It will automatically look that item up whenever I choose that and then add that as a vendor part, if that vendor part exists for this vendor. Otherwise, it would use the UPC number. You'll have your description. Then you choose the quantity you would like to order, and it's going to have the cost. You have the ability to adjust that cost, but if you adjust your order quantity here, and then leave your cost to whatever it was set, it's always going to multiply that order quantity times the parts cost to give you that total cost for that particular row. So if I choose this add update, it's then going to add that to the order at the cost of the item's individual cost times 2, because that's what I've ordered to. All right, so let's close this. So we're going to look at some of the filters next before we go on to the order methods. Filters by default is going to show all items. You can choose to order by department, measure category, and other tree categorizations. That's why whenever you're building your price book, it's so important to actually categorize your items properly. For example, if I go to my price book here and I look up an item, notice in my categorizations, I have this set to where I can run reports easy and I can also order easier. So if I wanted to run an order for a product group of Winston, in this case, it would look up all Winston product group items, which would be all of my Winston packs and cartons. That way, that order can be designated just to Winston's if I would like. It makes your ordering ability way more powerful than just by department itself. So other options below this is going to be use order requirements. This is a setting that may or may not be used depending on your location. This is really used for Philip Morris products. if you have a rule in place from your vendor to where if you order a certain number of cartons one week, you can set up what's called consistent ordering requirements over here and put a percentage of the items that if you order one week, you have to order a percentage of that the following week. And the system then would keep track of what you ordered the previous week and make sure that you follow that rule and you order at least a certain percentage of that value that you ordered last week this week. If you don't order that amount, it's going to warn you and let you know that you're breaking a rule. You can create an order as a transfer. You would just simply choose that checkbox, choose a store. In this case, since I'm ordering for store 1, I would choose store 2. And when I generate the order, it's actually going to place this order over in my transfers tab. There's the store view not required option, which we'll go over here in a bit. That's what's called a working order. And then there's a new setting called require multiples of blank with a min order quantity of blank. Those two blanks are going to be user input values, and this is a newer setting. This would be, it would basically, every item on the order would then follow this criteria. And what it is basically if you're ordering and you have this set, let's first look at this require multiple, this very first set, require multiples of blank. What it does is whenever, let's say that in this example, we have it set to 30, and we have an item that is ordered on the via replenishment, and we say that value it's trying to order, let's say 85. If I have this require multiples of 30 in place, it needs to order in multiples of 30, so 30, 60, 90, 120. So if the regular order algorithms have it set to order 85, it's going to add five items to that order to get it closest to the next multiple of 30. So in that case, it would add 5, and I would be at a multiple of 30, which would be 90. Now let's add something else to that with a min order percentage of 50% in this case. So what this would do is you have to be at least 50% of that multiple in order for it to round up. Otherwise, it's going to round down. So let's say that I have this set for 50, like I do, my 30 there, and my order algorithm wants me to order 44 of an item. Well, that would be 47% of the way between 30 and 60. It's not 50%, it's 47, so it's very close. So what it would do is it would remove 14 items, dropping me back down to 30. If I had 45 items, that would be 50% of that multiple of 30, and it would round up to 60. Now there's one note with this, and that's where if your order algorithm doesn't meet this very first number, that 30, let's say that it has 14, for example, it's not going to drop that down to 0. It's going to leave that at 14. So you know that, hey, I ordered something and it didn't meet this criteria here. I'm not going to drop it to 0. I'm going to have at least something on the order, and I can manually configure that as needed. All right, so let's look at some of the ordering methods. Min-max, that's a very simple method. What this does is it's going to utilize the min-max values on the item details page of your items. So if we look at an item here, on every item that has a vendor part, I would want to make sure that I have a min-max quantity. So min and max, and I would set that. What that would do is every time you get to that minimum quantity, it's going to order a maximum quantity. Very simple. Now, if you're in a corporate environment, take note that there's not really a way to have these values at min-max store specific. So what I mean by that is you can set minimum maximum values and send that down to a store, and then up it that min-max value in your corporate price book and send that down to another store. But as soon as you do a price change and send that down to the originating store, that min-max value is going to be overridden by what's currently here. So that's a flat min-max value that can't be differentiated between price book zones or stores. All right, the next method we're going to look at is going to be replenishment. This method is fairly simple. You have a date range. So in this case, I have a week. And what that's going to do is it's going to look at items I have in my filter. So let's say that I have my cigarettes here. And in between this time period, it's going to look and see what I sold and it's going to order that. Now there's a setting here right above the time frame called round up when subunit reaches X%. And that is used for items that have a purchase unit subunit parent-child relationship. Because if you sold 2 packs, you probably wouldn't want to order a carton. So what this setting does is, let's say that you sold 0 cartons, and in this case 4 packs in this order period. With this value set to 50, it would not order anything, simply because with it set to 50, you have to order 50% of that purchase unit. So in that case, you have to sell 50%, which would be 5 packs. Then it would order that one purchase unit. If you sold, let's say, 7 packs, then with this value set to 50, it would order 1 carton. So that could be changed. You can have that set to 80%, for example. That would mean you have to sell 80% of that purchase unit in order to order the parent unit. The next setting we're going to look at is going to be the use items min quantity. We'll go to that quantity on hand reorder point here momentarily. That min quantity means it's going to use this min value right here, and always make sure that you keep that min value in the store. The next setting we're going to look at, let me go back to replenishment here, is the include sold items with a 0 order quantity. And what this does is, if we go back to our very first example where we have sold 4 packs, it wouldn't order anything because it didn't meet that 50% of the subunit criteria. If we have this checked, it would put that item on the order, that carton on the order, but at a 0 quantity. What that does is that will let you know that you sold that item in that order period, but you didn't actually sell enough to order at the full vendor part. So you can at least look at your quantity on hand and make an educated decision on, do you actually need to place that on order or not. Finally, we're going to look at that quantity on hand reorder point. And what this is for is, this is a setting for items that do not have a subunit but have a vendor part quantity greater than 1. So an example of that would be here. We've got a Snickers item. And notice whenever I receive this vendor part in, I'm going to be receiving 24 of this UPC. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio. So when using that quantity on hand reorder point, I first have to set the values. And those values are set in 2 places. First, being the department. So on the department, I have a quantity on hand reorder point that I can put a percentage there. And on the item, when I look the item up, under the additional info hyperlink, there's also a quantity on hand reorder point. Now, if you have a department value and you also have an item value in place, then the item value is going to take precedence over the department value. It supersedes in every scenario. So if I have that set for 50%, that quantity on hand reorder point, first and foremost, I have to keep an accurate on hand. And what that would do is, whenever I'm ordering based on replenishment and I have that setting set, it's not going to order, if I sell 1, I'm going to order 1. It's not based on a replenishment method. It's based on your current quantity on hand when compared to the number of units received in that vendor part. So if I have that set for 50%, that means that I'm not going to order that part until I have 12 on hand, no matter what I sell. Once I have that 50%, then I'm going to order the vendor part. So if I sell, say, 4 of those in a time period, but I have 14 on hand, then I'm not going to order that vendor part. But if I sell, let's say, if I start off with 17 and I sell 6 of those, that would bring me down to 11 in that order period. In that case, I would order a vendor part, simply because I'm now below that 50% threshold. I'm below the 12 in that case of that UPC in the vendor part. All right, so that's how the replenishment order method works. Simply put, it's what I sell is what I'm going to order, and then you have those settings to change that. The next one we're going to look at is going to be the days of inventory. This is a method that uses your current quantity on hand, and in this time period, the time period you choose, which is most commonly 30 or 60 or 90 days, it's going to look at the average sales of all items in the filter and average those sales per day, and then use your current quantity on hand that you currently have and compare that to the number of days of inventory you'd like to have, which is based on your sales. So for example, let's say that I have an average sales per day in this time period of one of an item, and I currently have a quantity on hand of 5 of that item, and I want to keep 10 days inventory. Well, if I want to keep 10 days inventory and I sell 1 per day, that means I need to have 10 on hand. So if I currently have 5 on hand, I'm going to order 5. If I already had 10 on hand, then I wouldn't order anything at all. So it's going to use simply put, it's going to use your current quantity on hand, compare that to the number of days of inventory you would like to have, and then base that on the average sales per day of each item that's in this filter. Now you have the option to use the item's min quantity on hand as well for this, just like the replenishment it does the same thing, as well as the include sold items with a 0 order quantity. It does the same thing. The next method we're going to look at is going to be the hybrid. And that's going to be a hybrid and a combination of your replenishment and your days of inventory. So what this does is for new items, notice the new items day here, it's going to order based on replenishment. And for items that are older than this, it's going to order based on days of inventory. So let's look at an example. Let's say I'm ordering my miscellaneous department here. If I put in 60 here and I want to order for 10 days, what this is doing is items that are older than, let's say, 50 days. So items that are older that have been in my price book for longer than 50 days, I'm going to order based on replenishment. And for that, I'm going to look at 60 days history, get the average sales per day of those items in that 60 days, and order to keep 10 days on hand. So just like we said before, if I have an average sales per day of 1 and I have 10 on hand, I wouldn't order anything. But if I have 5, I would order 5. Now, if an item has not been in my price book for 50 days, then I'm going to order based on replenishment. So then it would order based on what I sold in that order period. There's the option to include today's and the date range. So that would be in this 60 days history. If I have this unchecked, it's going to start with yesterday and go back 60 days. If I have this checked, it's going to start with today and then go back 60 days. So you have that 1 day offset. Then you have your use items min quantity and the include sold items with 0 quantity. Those are the exact same thing. So that's how the replenishment hybrid works. Finally, there's a list all items from vendor with replenishment. And what that does is you will choose your filter, and it's going to list every item that's orderable by that vendor in the filter, and then order that based on replenishment. You just input your date range, you have the same replenishment options, and it's going to list all those items in that filter from that particular vendor under replenishment. So you'll see the 0, if there's a 0 order quantity, or items that have a 100 order quantity, whatever that number would be. Now, going back to our worksheet here, whenever we actually have an order, there's a couple options we can do. We can move columns around. Well, of course, we can calculate that out of stock. We can add or update items from this worksheet by choosing the vendor part. Then we can change that value and then add or update, and that will then alter the order quantity. You can delete items, print the order, print a guide of that order, sort your printing options, refresh your quantity on hand, adjust the quantity by a percentage of all items on that order, and then send your EDI. There's also a remove 0 quantity on hand, or remove 0 quantity. What that does is if you have any items on the order that has a 0 order quantity, it would drop those from the order. That would be great for methods that, like the list all items from vendor with replenishment. Also, it's good for include sold items with a 0 order quantity because you may not want to order all of those. So that covers all of the ordering methods. The next thing we're going to look at is the working order type. Working orders is a way for corporate to create an order, send that order down to the store. The store then look at the system values and walk their environment down if they need to, and then put their input of what they think they should order, send that back to corporate, and corporate would then see both values. They would see what the system thought should be ordered, and they'll see what the store thinks they should order. Then they have the final say of what is going to be ordered. So whenever you generate an order, if you have this unchecked, that store review not required unchecked, you give that order a description. Whenever you generate the order, it then goes to the working orders tab. And from here, you would then send that to the store. Now, if we look at an order here, the worksheet looks very, very similar to what a standard purchase order looks like, but notice it doesn't have a purchase order number, whereas a regular order does, in fact, have a purchase order number. That's because it doesn't get a purchase order number until that order is completed. So once that order is sent from this corporate to the store then can view that order from the point of sale. So I'm going to log into the point of sale here. And if you have permission to view those orders, you would choose the Actions, the Reorder, and the Working Orders button. That will then show you your available working orders. At this point, you would choose a working order, and then you can see the same thing we were seeing in Director. You see the items that were being ordered. You'll see the department, your current quantity on hand, your 52 high and low, and all of your sales weeks. Now notice you have the suggested quantity. That's what the system thinks you should order. But the store can change that value. They can put what they think they should order. So I can change that, or I can leave it the same. When I'm done, when you're done with that working order, you choose Send to Corporate. And that will then send that back to corporate. We'll go back to Director here. And whenever that order is opened, you'll see the suggested quantity on hand, the store quantity on hand, and then you can choose what the actual quantity would be, what you actually want to order. Whenever you're done, you would choose the Complete Order option. That would then remove this order from the working order screen, move that over to your previous order screen, and have it assigned a purchase order number. So at that point, then you can treat it like any normal purchase order, complete that order, send it via EDI, convert it to an invoice, whatever your normal procedures would be. All right, so I hope everybody learned something today. Once again, these are weekly events we do every Friday at 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern. You can view these events if you go to our website, goftx.com, choose the FTX Lifeline tab, choose the Webinars button, and that'll give you a listing of all of our upcoming webinars, our previous webinars, and the option to sign up for our newsletter. If you have any questions about what we've seen today, let us know at websupport@FastTracksPOS.com, or if you have any suggestions on future webinars, let us know at info@goftx.com. Thank you, and hope you have a great weekend.